Hi, everyone. Great to be with you today. I'm going to talk to you today about some topics that are near and dear to my heart. We're going to talk about the intersection of social impact, inclusion, and digital accessibility, and how you can bring DEI into your digital work. I know everyone has sort of been experiencing some technical difficulties earlier. I've heard about some other sessions have been having problems, so we're going to keep our fingers crossed that the session today here with you all today is flawless and without any technical hiccups. We'll dive right in. I'll just get through some housekeeping. I've got my window open, so I've got the chat sort of coming in from y'all, so it's great to hear. I see some stuff popping in already, which is awesome. Great to have you all out there. We're going to talk today, and it's going to be as interactive as we can make it. I'm super sad that we couldn't have Netroots in person this year, but that is the case with a lot of conferences, sadly, with the raging of COVID still happening out there. We want to keep everyone safe. So we're going to do this digitally and virtually, and we're going to do the best we can and kind of keep it interactive. So I've got a lot of cool topics to talk about with you today. But certainly if something comes up, I will do my best to, I don't have anybody else there helping me moderate the questions and ideas that pop in, but please, if something is coming up, I will periodically just sort of take a minute and review things that are happening over in the messages area. So please feel free to comment, ask questions, and I will get to them as I can in breaks. I will take pauses throughout and, specifically stop and ask for questions, but if something's coming up in between those pauses, please feel free to ask a question. I will try to get to it as quickly as I can. So great to be with you all, even virtually today. I'm Jen Frazier. I'm the president and founder of Firefly Partners. We are a small but mighty women-owned digital agency, and I've been working in the nonprofit sector for a long time. Let's see, I started my first job. I started working at Planned Parenthood Federation in '99 when I got out of grad school, and then started diving right into political advocacy work, and everything was online at the time. Did that for about a decade and really started to see the transformation that digital was happening in advocacy work that I've been doing kind of my whole life. I've been a lifelong advocate, an activist, and really was fascinated by how digital came and sort of took over and everything that was happening in the advocacy space. I was in DC at the time, but it was almost like the beginning of the national email and emailing your Congress was so overpowering and powerful to members of Congress that it became sort of a almost not a supplement to in-person lobbying, but kind of the main force. So I've been sort of fascinated with digital and its impact on how we can sort of communicate with each other. It is a space where obviously we've been forced into over the last couple of years, the past 18 months with COVID specifically, almost primarily. And so it's sort of heightened my interest in sort of understanding the ways in which we communicate digitally with each other. And as we've been talking more and more, and again, I've been really in the social impact space for kind of my whole life, sort of the impact of those two has come across the radar pretty strongly for me, how those intersect. One of, again, the areas I'm most excited about recently is how we can expand our understanding of inclusion in the digital space and how critical a role accessibility and digital accessibility plays in that realm. So we're going to talk a little bit more about digital accessibility today and why it's so important and why it's so important in these spaces with all the folks out there, you all doing this amazing, great work in the social impact and social justice space. So I was a little bit shocked. This has been a bit of a transformation for us, even at Firefly. We've been doing digital work since 2007. And really accessibility has been something that we've sort of looked at. We've done accessibility on websites here and there, but it hasn't been a major area of focus for us. And sort of we had a bit of awakening this year with sort of the re-emphasis on kind of doubling down on equity, inclusion, and thinking about what does inclusion really mean, which we'll talk about in the digital space. And it became very clear that accessibility and digital accessibility was sort of a foundational piece that could no longer really be kind of relegated to, yeah, it's a nice to have, or I'll get to that, or it's over there, or that's really only for certain populations. And it's like, oh no, this is core and central to what we're doing and has to be sort of a wake-up call for all of us to be more cognizant and more able to get to this in a more comprehensive way across our digital efforts. So 61 million Americans are living with some form of disability. And I heard somebody on a talk the other day kind of talk about folks that we consider to be sort of able-bodied and are sort of temporarily able-bodied, because almost at some point in everyone's life, you have and experience some sort of a disability that actually forces you into some of these categories. And as we all age, as we'll talk about, your levels of accessibility, and needs increase over time. So whether you are someone that actually is dealing with a physical impairment, cognitive impairment, some of the other things we're going to talk about today currently or not only is it important for us to think about those folks all the time and making a most inclusive and open space as we can, we're all going to experience it at some point in our lives, almost likely. It impacts all of us in different ways and different times. But really what I'm trying to get across today is also just thinking about accessibility in your digital spaces as a true form of inclusion. If we really want to be opening the door and asking everyone to come through it and participate in the hard work that we're trying to do to affect real change, we need every single person to show up, and we cannot afford to shut the door or create barriers for anyone who wants to step up and get involved and participate in the work that we're doing. So every time you interact with somebody, there shouldn't be a barrier or a hindrance for those folks to get involved with your work. Disabled folks, I hear you, I see you, I'm with you, I'm going to do my best to be an ally. I'll just out myself right now saying this is a learning space for me too. Our company, again, as I said, is sort of really transforming right now and focusing in on digital accessibility as a core competency for us. So if I say anything today that is maybe not 100% correct, please have grace. I'm in a learning space too, but this is such an important topic for me that I also wanted to create the opportunity for us to talk and discuss this openly. But I'm an ally in my temporarily able-bodied space to be with you and make things as inclusive and accessible for all of us as possible. And so like I said, we're going to talk about sort of the intersection between these three major areas today. So inclusion and digital accessibility and social impact. Basically, we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, but things that are intentionally designed to include all users. They're technically proficient, so they are providing access and providing the opportunities for sort of the different adaptive technologies to help folks with different abilities. But really, again, in this space, we are looking to build things that are purposefully including as many people as possible, because that's our MO in the world, right? We want to be as inclusive as possible, bring everybody along and get everybody jazzed up about the particular work that you're doing in the social impact, social justice spaces. So we can't afford to leave anyone behind. If you're doing equity work out there, you're working hard to create these awesome spaces for everybody, working for advancing the rights of all, we really have to think about how we present ourselves digitally, as again, this has been such a center point for all of us for the last 18 months to 20 months, being forced in your homes and away from the opportunity to interact with people. How you come across digitally is more important than ever. So we're going to talk about why this is so critical also for folks in this progressive space, more importantly than any. So today we're going to go in a little bit deeper. We're going to unpack the digital accessibility, inclusive design, and social impact pieces a little bit more, the intersection of those, and then we're going to just get into some basic brass tacks about how you can start to do this. It is a lot to think about, and we'll talk about a lot of pieces today, and I will, again, spend time making sure that we're able to answer questions and go through some of this. This isn't meant to be like obviously a comprehensive talk about how to incorporate all the accessibility you can into your digital landscape. It's really meant to be an eye opener, a conversation starter, and for you to get interested and excited about this at your organization. And hopefully light bulbs are going to go off and people are going to get excited and you're going to be motivated and want to have conversations all the way through to, executive leadership and your board and talk about this is important. We got to reprioritize and really think about, as we're thinking about redoing any sort of digital in the next year or two, really thinking about how to include more accessibility into it in an effort to really stand out for that inclusion in space that we're trying to strive for. I'm going to go ahead and look at questions really fast. Awesome. Yeah, diverse communities. It's our jam. That's what we're doing. And diversity of all flavors. So obviously, we want to make sure that I'll talk about a lot of different flavors of people's perspectives and talk about how we really approach everything with empathy. That's a big piece of it too. So really thinking about diversity of experiences and diversity of your audiences in the most inclusive way possible. So we're going to dive right in. Lots of times when I've been talking to folks or I've been hearing sessions, people talk about digital accessibility, and and again, I'll put myself in this category. In the last 2 years, probably this has started to really change in the last 9 months specifically, but really it's been, when I think about digital accessibility, I think about folks with different levels of abilities, motor abilities, number one. So it's disabled users of different abilities, people that need either a vision impairment, other physical impairments, they need screen readers, they might need to get through your site or your digital properties, maybe using a keyboard. We're looking for things like making sure there's high contrast for, again, folks with visual impairments, things like that. And I kind of just was like, yeah, it's a lot. It's very code-based. It's very, in my mind, digital accessibility has been sort of relegated into like, yes, I just make sure that my code handles that, and then I'm kind of good. And then I've sort of kind of checked that box. And it was a little bit more the way that I used to think about it back a few years ago. And it's true that digital accessibility, really at its core, is about making sure that all of your digital properties are operable and accessible by the widest audience possible. So it is very code-based, and it is actually ultimately at its core a set of technical standards. So I know that folks have probably heard of, maybe you've heard of WCAG, which is the last one here, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. You've heard of maybe Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, or maybe you've heard of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. Are things ADA compliant? Are they 508 compliant? It's good to kind of just do a little digging into these and look at the differences. So essentially, I won't go too far down the rabbit hole, but the WCAG guidelines are really kind of a set of technical standards for code on your digital properties. It's not legal, it's not binding, it's just letting you know, are your digital properties in alignment with what the World Wide Web Consortium has set up to be. These are the standards that you need to adhere to ensure that your digital properties are accessible, usable, operable for folks with different levels of abilities that are coming to your digital properties. It's really good to look at. It's super technical, super for your developers, so we can kind of keep it at a high level for this conversation, but certainly something that you're going to want to have folks on your team, on your tech team, your web team, your dev team, start to take a look at, and we can help sort of give you some guidance around that. I've got a whole list of resources at the end of this. The 508, Section 508 and ADA are laws. They're legal, they're legally binding. They're really right now implicating government agencies, other entities in the public space that need to ensure that their digital properties are adhering to these set of standards. Right now, there have been, we'll get into this, but it doesn't technically apply to all of us in maybe the private sector. But these are standards that basically more and more, like you're right now, opening yourselves up to potential liabilities or potential lawsuits if your website isn't accessible. Private companies, other companies are being sued by folks with different levels of abilities, disabilities, because their websites are so unuser friendly that they can't adhere access to, purchase services or things like that. And so it's important to understand sort of what's out there legally, what's out there in terms of where, your responsibilities are on the one hand, but really it's actually more about doing it because it's the right thing to do. So legalese aside, really what you want to do is think about how can I ensure that my digital properties are available, operable, accessible by anyone who shows up and wants to participate, read, engage with my organization, get involved in any way. How can I make sure that there's no barriers in place? So that's really when you get into the WCAG guidelines that help you understand what code-wise and what technically needs to be put in place to make sure that different folks with different abilities can access your site or your digital. So it's not just some of these physical impairments that you think of: blind, deaf, differently motor skills, other things. There's a lot of other disabilities or impairments or other diseases that are happening for people that cause barriers to happen on your site. So some things I hadn't really considered that much before a few months ago was thinking about folks with ADHD who have difficulty concentrating or reading long blocks of text on your site, as an example. Or the other one I heard of the other day was if you have a form on your site, if you have a different, like you have a long application process for something potentially, and it has a timer and has a times out. First of all, I find that super annoying anyway, and I don't, have some of these impairments, but I'm like mildly ADHD, and I go look off at other sites, and I come back, and then I realize that the site is timed out, all my information is gone, I have to start all over again. Ugh, how annoying. Okay, so try to think about that when you're thinking, okay, how are my users interacting with my site? Are there ways in which I can either help them save it halfway through filling out a form? I can definitely give that timer, although now I've heard that having that timer available of when the site is going to refresh actually causes other types of anxiety. So really the best thing you can do is let people know that they can save their progress, come back, things like that. But certainly be cognizant of those types of things. Epilepsy, other neurological disorders, anything that's flashing on your site, or text or anything that's kind of moving in and out. Sometimes these things you don't know this can cause a seizure to come on from different users. So a lot of times we say, please just take a lot of those things off your site, or at the very least, make sure that they are only there if someone presses play and you have warnings very clearly, like may cause seizures. Those types of things that are, just again, really thinking about your user's perspective. Obviously, we talked about the elderly a little bit, thinking about all of our great supporters and donors potentially and volunteers that are sort of in the retirement age, and different impairments that are going to come on for them over the years. Mobility issues happen, eye degeneration, other physical impairments start to become more prevalent as we age. So just thinking about, again, your users, how you need to adjust for them and their particular set of needs. And then another good one to think about is like dyslexia and other learning disabilities, really being cognizant of the level of words you use, sort of the reading level that's on your site, to think about how can I make sure that I'm speaking to my whole audience in digestible, understandable terms. I'm not speaking past anybody. I'm not too full of jargon. There's a cool app on my list called the Hemingway App that literally you just can paste in your content and will tell you what the reading level is and give you suggestions and maybe how to make it easier. It also talks about sentence structure and things like that. So I know a lot of us work in policy work. It gets very wonky. You get into the technical details. Love it. And sometimes you can put some of those in some of those briefs, and you can have that because you're speaking to like a legal audience, for example. Great. They understand the legalese and the technical jargon that goes into policy work. But for the lay reader on your site to get involved, sign up, and understand what you all are trying to do, really try to discuss and put it out there in more simpler terms so folks can access, digest, and understand all the great work that you're doing. Those are just a couple of examples about ways we need to think about our user when we talk about how we code and build the site and how we put the language into it. So as we transition into, oh gosh, there's lots of great comments. Video captioning apps. Again, I have a couple resources. Awesome, these are great comments. Yeah. So inclusive digital design is sort of a slightly related, but slightly to the side discipline. So when you talk about digital accessibility, it's really kind of more in the technical weeds, generally speaking, thinking about it from an inclusive perspective. Some of the things I was talking about sort of bleed from the technical and the content into this inclusive digital design. So really what it is the concept, I don't know how many folks are familiar with the universal design approach, but again, it starts with your user, really starts with, I have a little diagram later in the presentation, talks about design thinking and always putting yourself from the perspective of your user, and really thinking about what's it like for folks with different abilities to come to your site, interact, and work with the information you're providing in your digital channels. So it's really trying to say, if I'm looking at this from a universal perspective, it is what it says. It's universal. It's open for all. So it's this approach and methodology that really helps take you. How many times we've worked with clients and we work with them on their website, and it's really about the team at the organization really think about how can I best put this information out there? And it's a very internal out approach. What we're really trying to do now with clients is turn that around and push everything into the user perspective. Like, yes, you as an organization need to get your information out. You want to tell people what you're doing, you want to engage them, but really thinking about how the user is coming to you and going to be digesting and navigating and sort of working their way through the content and your navigation through your site or through digital properties. It's really about saying, I hear you, I see you, I'm making this as accessible to you as possible so that you can come and you can engage and you're not experiencing any barriers to participation with me in the work that we're doing and moving this cause forward. So really, again, like I say in the last one, it starts with that empathy for the user. We'll talk about that over and over again in inclusive design work. It's and again, we'll talk about this too. It's not just about what you think your users need. It's about asking. And that's one of the biggest things I want to hear from my user. I don't want to assume what it's like. I need to ask, and then I need to test. So I'm going to ask, we're going to find a bunch of stuff out, and then we're going to build some things, and we're going to test it. And you're going to give me feedback, and then we're going to iterate on it until it's the experience that you're hoping for that gives you. I had somebody tell me universal design is an approach where I hope that every single user comes and experiences joy when they're working through anything that I create in a digital space. There's no barriers, there's no complications, there's no, I don't understand what you're talking about, this is causing me difficulty. It's a delight to come and interact with and experience and use your digital properties. So think about that, and everybody's got a unique perspective. How can I do my best to engage with folks where they are? So like I said, sometimes people will go, but that's digital accessibility, but that's inclusive design. Where's the line? They're very close, but they're not always the same thing. So we really come at it from Firefly with inclusive approach first, and accessibility is a very solid core component of that. But as I say in this example, you can have something that's fully accessible and digitally accessible, but it could be somebody like a hate group or other groups that aren't thinking about equity and inclusion. So that's technically accessible, but not inclusive. But when I think about this in the work that we're doing, it's inclusive first, and how accessible can I make it to ensure that inclusive universal approach into my digital. So inclusivity is the experience of your user, and the accessibility is technically making it happen so they can interact and engage with. And some of the other pieces that to consider, so it's not just about sort of the individual experience in terms of like your physical impairments, cognitive, these things about when we talk about accessibility and disability, it's the where that person sits in the world. What are their other circumstances around them? I can't stress this enough, how important it is in an inclusive approach to really, really go double down on your mobile first approach. Think about all the folks that you might know or interact with that like live and breathe on their phone, but also have a computer. But then think about all the folks out there that your phone is your only lifeline to the internet. That's all you've got. Many, many, many circumstances where a digital experience is basically 100% on a mobile phone. So think about that mobile first design in everything you do. How easy is it? How user friendly? How big are your buttons so people can punch on them? How does it look? How does something that looks great on a big screen scale down? We consider doing, let's design it on the phone first and then see what it looks like on the big screen later, because most folks are interacting with your digital on a phone. Also need to think about low bandwidth folks that are on public Wi-Fi who don't have good access. Really, really think about reducing the size of your images on your sites. Again, making it really fast download times. People with low bandwidth aren't going to be seeing your site. All these different things that you need to think about. If you're on a work computer only, or if you're at school, And those are the only times that folks have computers. Think about, they don't have a lot of flexibility. Maybe they, in the day we're really relegated to Internet Explorer. But it is the technology that is on a lot of the public computers is obviously very locked down. So you think about, if that's the only experience that somebody has to access my work, I can't be over here testing and looking at my site on a big fancy monitor with all the latest bells and whistles and all these things and think that's the same experience that someone is going to have if they're trying to access my site from a public school work type computer situation. So that's more of, again, situationalizing it, and again, having that empathy for the user. So it's mostly, again, about how you design and test and thinking about the variety of experiences out there in that inclusive space, in your inclusive approach. And obviously, I don't need to talk to you all about what social impact, but I actually did some research because I just think, okay, well, everybody knows what social impact is. I'll just blow right past that, which is true. But I found a couple of really cool definitions of social impact, because as an organization at Firefly too, we bumble around on terminology a lot, and we go, okay, great. Is it social impact? Is it social justice? Is it mission driven? Is it greater good? What's the right terminology that we're trying to go for here? And people of all sort of flavors, sort of say, I'm working for the good. I'm mission driven. All these things, but a lot of folks that maybe I don't align with ideologically are also mission driven. They have a very different mission than I do, but they're mission driven. So I liked the definitions I found about social impact, about addressing a pressing social challenge and working toward the betterment of all people. That's the piece that I liked the most about the definitions I found about social impact work is long-term change, long-lasting change, working from an understanding of all folks and really, really working for the betterment of all people. But I liked also the diversity of experiences that are coming together towards a common goal to really better and work towards a better tomorrow, which is what we've got here. And as we know, again, back to in digital spaces, we can't afford to leave anybody out of the conversation. We need to have the broadest audience possible. It's pretty much mandatory at this point that you look across all your channels and make sure that you're open, inclusive, accessible in everything that you're doing. Because otherwise you're leaving people out, and we can't have that. So let's talk about this. I'm going to look back for... I love this. I'm a pretty old activist. I feel ya. I'm with ya, Carol. I'm an old activist as well. I just turned 50 this year. So I'm very excited about that as a milestone. I feel like the second half is the better half. But hey, I love all my young people out there as well. I have an 11-year-old and a 15-year-old, so I'm trying to help them prepare themselves for the work ahead. But I feel ya out there too. All right, so we're going to talk about how these intersect, and then we're going to dive in. So I think I don't have to do a lot of convincing for folks out there that this is the right thing to do. I think we get it, we know it. But in case you're maybe executive directors or your board or other folks that are holding on to the budgets, are like, yeah, we can't afford it. We don't have time for that. We can't make that happen. It's too technically difficult. All these different things. I just want to, you can take this, and you'll obviously have access to the deck, but you can push this in front of them and say, oh, hello, we are leaving dollars on the table. If we are putting up barriers to interacting with our organization, getting involved, and certainly on the donate pages, we have a problem. We got these, first of all, right now in this country, it's the 61 million Americans and more that have a disability that they come to your site, 95%, boop, they have trouble, they leave, they don't come back. So you've lost a potential supporter right out of the gate. That's obviously a tragedy. We don't want that to happen. There's $6 billion of spending happening out there amongst these 61 million Americans. Let them come and interact with you and participate and give if they can without any sort of intrusion or barrier in place. The other one is that, well, as a middle-aged lady, I've cared about this stuff my whole life. But it's societally, please, that folks are hopefully having some bit of a, awakening in a moment to be like, this is no longer a nice to have. We've heard over and over again, and we've seen a lot of trends, and I've seen a lot of research about millennials and Gen Z who are basically demanding that big corporate, other events, that other brands really step up and say, it's not enough to either pay lip service to this anymore. You need to put your money where your mouth is. You need to do more. You need to give back more. And sort of saying inclusion and social consciousness out of brands is now a necessity for young people to show up, even engage, get excited, get involved. So they're going to demand this of you, even if your maybe executive team isn't ready to maybe move the dollars. You have to say, not only are we leaving out the folks that actually have the disabilities and can't interact with us, we're actually turning away young folks who demand this sort of inclusion and acceptance and openness and diversity of opportunity in everything that we do. So folks like right now loved seeing that the Socio app had a whole accessibility piece in it that would allow users of different abilities to come and interact with the Socio app. Those types of things are no longer, again, sort of nice to have. They're must have. So you look at your digital properties and you're like, yeah, we could use some, fine tuning around there. Again, maybe your folks who have the dollars, in the budget are saying, yeah, maybe not. It's not really a maybe anymore. It's let's do it. And if they need it, we can provide sort of some of this ROI of dollars that are literally being left on the table in different ways. So certainly can't have that. And then if you need to, increase it. So first of all, the nice to have, I like to say, is our carrot. And then like we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And then you have, you're leaving money on the table. And then you get to sort of the not so pleasant side of this, like I talked about. There are lawsuits that are happening every day. So I don't like to spend a lot of time on this because I don't want anybody to be in a space where they feel like they need to be forced into doing the right thing. But lawsuits are coming, they're happening. There were over 3,500 that were lodged last year alone about accessibility on websites and people with different abilities coming to folks and then saying, no, this is no longer an option. I'm actually going to bring a lawsuit to force this change. Let's not be those folks. Let's go, you know what? I get it. It's the right thing to do. I want to be a leader, step up, be forward thinking, and be, open about being like, this is an initiative we're going to take as an organization. I really want to do it. I want to be ahead of the curve. And I don't want to have to wait for that. Okay, now we're all being forced into this because obviously this is all what we're doing. We're fighting today for a better tomorrow. Let's try and have it happen sooner rather than later in our digital properties. All right, so we get it. We're on board, Jen. You've convinced me. How do I do this? Well, I like to go, it's a little bit of a marathon, and it's actually not even a marathon. I like to think of it as a nice long walk that just kind of keeps going because as we'll talk about, there's no sort of quick fix. You don't just sort of check a box. I know there's been a lot of press about overlays, which are these tools like Accessibility that you might have heard about in the press. And they are claiming to be sort of a quick fix for making your digital accessible. We can make your website accessible. Boom, you put this plugin on, and then suddenly everything is, unicorns and rainbows. And then if anyone's paying extra attention, you'll know that not really. Like it does fix some things, but unfortunately, it kind of unintentionally creates different barriers or different problems in other areas. While it will do a quick fix around certain things, there's no replacing, again, that empathy and that user approach, both in the creation of what you're doing and in the ongoing testing. So certainly, accessibility might be like a short-term, thing that you have to be committed at your organization to say, we get it. We understand that we want to make our digital as inclusive as possible, and that means doing as much as we can on digital accessibility. A quick fix like Accessibility might be like a temporary 3-month solution, but we are actually working behind the scenes to really transform our whole website from a user perspective to be as open and inclusive as possible. But really, like I said here, you kind of just have to dig in and do the work. And I know you all are, very familiar with that concept. We've been digging in and doing this work for a long time. Thinking about it in your digital, it's again, this is a lovely graphic one I wanted to share. I won't go into this. There's whole talks just on design thinking. So I recommend if you're interested and really curious about this approach, which I hope you are after listening to this. This is the Nielsen Norman Group has this particular take on design thinking. There's other folks, but the the empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, implement has been pretty adopted right now in terms of how you do a very user-centric approach to the work that you're doing in digital spaces. So again, you start with that user, you really get through it and come through with all your definitions after talking to all your users a lot. Come up with all the crazy ideas that you want to do. Then you start prototyping those and saying, okay, users, how's this working for you? Let's show you this version of our website. Let's look at this version of our homepage. How's that working? We're going through all this user testing. And once you feel like you've gotten a good place, you can roll some of that out. So it takes more time and more energy, but you come out with a much more holistic, user-centered outcome than you would if you were just back and you're behind the scenes going, quick fix, do this, turn it around, launch it, boom, we got it. And then later, maybe trying to figure out what your users think about it. So it's good to include your users all along the way for what we're going to talk about. So the first things I recommend is really just starting with a quick audit of your digital properties. You kind of don't know where to start if you don't know where the biggest problems are. It can feel a little overwhelming. So what you want to do is kind of come through. I've got, again, a list of free tools. So this also doesn't need to be a huge investment from your organization standpoint right out of the gate. You can do a lot of this work yourself. I've got resources upon resources. I've got a quick list. If you want more, you can always get in touch and I can give you more resources to go through your website, to go through your digital properties, your emails, any social. Again, once you get into social, you start to get into places that are a little bit out of your control. Obviously, you're not in control of Twitter. You're not in control of this, but you can think about the designs that you're putting out into social posts. Are they a good color contrast? Are they accessible? Do they have alt text code behind it? Do they have some of these things? And you can control what you can control. And then again, you get into some of these platforms that are not totally in control, but do what you can within the platforms that you're working in. So you want to look for accessible code that works with a screen reader or other assistive technologies. You want to look for your language, your imagery. You want to make sure you've got your alt tags in place. You've got that reading level that you're thinking about, so it's open and available to all your users. You want to make sure everything is navigable with a keyboard or other assistive technology tools. And then you want to obviously, again, make, at the very least, these are like your quick list. These are like your must-dos. Checking your brand color contrast, making sure it meets accessibility standards. But there are all these free tools I'll tell you about, you can get to, and you can just run your site, your digital, your emails, all these pieces through these filters and through these testers, and they'll come back and go, and they'll give you basically the list of things that need to be fixed, and then you can start to put a plan in place. Obviously, like I said, the most important thing you can do is starting talking with your users. So sometimes you'll find, obviously, that if you've tried to have people come and they've had a barrier, they'll have gone away and they won't even be there for you to be a user. So what you can do is actually, talk to the users that you have, find out different abilities that they have and different needs they have. What is their perspective? Get them involved. Make a user group, make a tester group out there of folks that are already engaged with you, and then reach out to other places like WeCo or Perkins or other folks that actually staff folks with a wide range of different abilities that can actually help you be live testers for anything that you're trying to create. So you talk to your users and you go, gosh, what are your pain points? Where have you struggled? What's been difficult for you when you've interacted with my digital? Help them understand, or have them help you understand what your biggest pain points are and what they've been struggling with. And you can get this really specific feedback, and then you start putting a list together. Between your own audits and talking to users, and then maybe talking to some other folks that may be beyond your initial user group and folks from with different abilities, you can start to put together this map of areas that are sort of like, these things are kind of on fire. These things I need to address soon. These things I can, get to. It's all important, not gonna lie. So you do need to, again, think this is it's a walk. There's no sprinting here. You're gonna be kind of addressing this and looking at it and thinking about it and sort of modifying. And obviously you need to think about this for any new thing that you're gonna create over time. So this isn't, again, just like a quick fix it, great, I'm done. Because what are you doing? You're constantly updating your digital. You're constantly pushing out new items, pushing out new cool things on your website, on your social channels, in your emails. Any digital properties that are out there are awesome because they're always changing. But with that comes the need to sort of make sure you're addressing all your users as best you can and thinking about all those different perspectives from the user perspective of like, help me understand, is this going to work for you or not? And really, when you sit in this create, test, iterate, you're just there. Because really what we're doing is we're obviously opening ourselves up to a space of vulnerability and saying, I don't know what's going to, what somebody else's perspective is here. I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask openly and say, again, I'm an ally. I'm doing the best I can from where I sit to help what I'm doing be as open and available, accessible, and usable for anyone that might come. So I'm asking for your honest feedback. I'm asking for you to participate with me in this. And so there's obviously someone's going to have to be engaged with you and care and want to help you, transform your digital so that you can get your message out to as broadest audience as possible. So it's kind of ongoing, but there are lots of tools out there that can help. So I'm going to go quickly through a couple of examples. I'm going to just push it out to Q&A. I know we have till 1:15, so I definitely want to hear and read through some questions that you've got coming through on the chat. I see a lot of good conversations happening over there, which is awesome. So we built an accessible website for our friends at Prison Health North Texas in Dallas. And as you can see, they have this lovely rainbow color palette. And so that was already an immediate like, how are we going to handle the rainbow, which I love, but sometimes isn't as accessible as it needs to be because it can cause some color contrast things we'll talk about. So a couple things just quickly that we did. Simple things go a long way. That's the other thing I want to sort of get across is that it doesn't need to be everything and it doesn't have to be fully, transformative. Even just simple things like putting the words your email here in an open text field will allow a screen reader to tell a user that's visually impaired that now you're in a space where you need to put your email in here. Simple. Genius. Like, why wouldn't we have always done this so that it reads out your email, or you put your email here or enter your email here. That just is, again, it's a cue for a screen reader to help folks visually impaired know what they're supposed to do in different form fields. The other thing, when you pull this form field up, if you have a low impairment and you're able to see some, or again, ADHD, some of the things that we found and learned is that helping people with visual cues, like when you have mouse overs and things pop out or things change color when your mouth, that is extremely helpful for someone that sort of has either low visual ability or ADHD that doesn't know quite where to focus their energy. Right here, all we did was put a simple outline around every form field that you're filling out when it's active. And again, it helps a screen reader, and the highlight box helps people know where they're supposed to be putting their energy and effort. Back to our rainbow. So we had to sort of temper the full rainbow. We did it here and there, and we did it in different places. But anytime we tried to do a text overlay, we had to make sure that we had a dark layer behind the white to ensure that it was going to be readable. The other thing you want to make sure you're doing is always have live text over an image. So what that means is that your text is not part of the image. It is a layer on top, and it is editable live text. If it's embedded in the image, a screen reader can do nothing with it. It doesn't know it is just an image. Even if you have an alt tag there, it's just more difficult to navigate through and knowing what is live text and what's not. It's a lot. Then too has to do with how you get through your site with a keyboard. It treats images different than text. So make sure you keep your text live and editable and a layer on top of any image. And then if again, you'll look at, and I'll pop over if we have a minute and show you a couple of these color contrast checkers to make sure that your color contrasts are adhering to the RECAG guidelines, making sure that it's readable for folks with different levels of visual impairment. Again, we had to work with their rainbow colors to sort of make sure that everything we were doing had a high color contrast. Not very much had the full rainbow. We then stuck to sort of the dark background and a light color, really good to strike that balance, and seeing what colors can work above and on top of each other to keep the high contrast necessary for visual folks and needs on different devices. We made it easy for the Prism folks to update the alt tags and basically made it like a requirement. So anytime they add an image, we made it so this sort of the alt text pops up so that they don't ever forget to put their alt text in for any image. And then basically, obviously, again, this helps our users with a screen reader know what the image is about. If it's a background image or if it's purely decorative, you leave it blank. But obviously, if it's descriptive or informative in any way, you want to make sure that you're putting in the right type of text into those alt text boxes. I saw a good talk on that the other day about, don't just say, this is a doctor in a white suit. Say, we want to help you make the right healthcare choices, fill out this form below or something, or something like that. Because it's not just about sort of describing what's going on in the image, it's contextualizing the alt text to make sure that, again, think of it with the image isn't there. And what does the user need to know about either the feeling or the information that's being purveyed through the image. Really start to think about what alt text is there for your user. So it's good. And again, I don't know if anyone's ever gotten one of those emails, or if you, like me, I just have my images turned off to make my emails load faster. It's really telling when someone, it shows up and there's an email and there's nothing on the screen, because everything is an image and my images are turned off. That helps you also understand when you've got all of your text embedded in images, your folks with screen readers see nothing, they hear nothing, they can't participate in that email or engage with it in any way because all the text is hidden. So again, just be thinking about these things. There's just a couple things we baked in to that Prism website that we built. So obviously there's a lot, and there's a whole, like when I send you the resources list, there's resources upon resources upon resources to help you understand and navigate through what it takes to make it digitally accessible. But hopefully what you've gleaned out of this talk today is that it's critically important. Those of us working in the social impact space, the need to make your digital fully accessible and approach it with an inclusion mindset is critical. It's a lot, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming. There's incremental steps you can do. Again, you can do an audit, you can start talking to your users, you can figure out what are the most critical elements in your whole digital landscape that need the most. I'm guessing that right now we're pushing into end of year. Those donation forms, take a look. I'll go through some of these, and then the emails that you're going to be sending out to folks in your end of year cycle. Make sure that they come through. You test them on a wide variety of platforms and operating systems and email clients, so you really see what the users are seeing, and then see what they look like with different abilities on their side, or what they sound like for a screen reader. That'll be really telling to you. I have a screen reader that I just installed, and it's fascinating to think about how you start navigating the web with only having things read to you. It's a very different experience. It's good. It's a good empathy motivator there. It's like, oh, right. I need to understand what other folks are experiencing and how I can do a better job of translating the work I'm doing to make sure that it's reaching every person most effectively and from their perspective. So here is my giant list of resources. There's a bunch. And this is obviously just scratching the surface. So we've got this as this is in the slide deck that you'll get. We will also make it available on our exhibitor page, and we can certainly send this and others. I'm happy to go deeper with this with anybody who's interested. Let me go back over here and look through the questions and other things that have come up. I know we have about 10 minutes. So a couple things that I really love about. So if you go into the allyproject.com, and or ally talks, this one down here, this it's A11Y, which actually is short for accessibility. It's a long word to type and it's got a lot of I's. Anyone who's ever tried to type accessibility a bunch of times, you will misspell it. So A11Y, but short is ally. I'm going to actually just bring up a couple of these so people can see them in action. Oh. And it is good for your SEO. Thank you for that. Yes, your alt text is good for your SEO, 100%. Phone. Captions on this training if needed them. There is in the Socio app a way to go into your settings. I don't know if anyone's seen this. It's pretty cool. They actually have a pretty good, I checked it out yesterday. They actually have a pretty good set of tools back there. When you go into sort of the area where it's your profile, you can do accessibility needs and you can sort of change all the things essentially for anything. And you can, it's a good practice for anyone who doesn't maybe have visual impairment and turn on like a screen reader, turn on some of these other things and see and hear what that is like for folks. Oh, okay, look at you, you guys are on top of it. Transcribe live, that would be a challenge to hear this. I think after they get posted, they have the transcription available. Oh, client chat on the screen. You know, I don't know how to have the client chat on the screen at the same time. That's a good one. You know what? I'll mention that, and I'll see if folks can do that for other sessions. Access to resource list. So again, in the exhibitor area, we have this as a PDF that you can download, and then these are all live links in the PDF that we will make available in the exhibitor and on our exhibitor area on the exhibitor page. If you go out into back out into the main Netroots Nation area, this is here again. I've got also my I've got my email here. We've got a little form you can fill out there too if you want to have a longer conversation about this. I'm always happy to dive in deeper. This is a new like passion area for me, and I'm like a kid at Christmas, and I'm just like learning and diving in, and every day I'm learning something new and exciting and interesting in this area, and it's like a whole new world has opened up. So I'm happy to explore with you and share what I've learned along the way. But definitely we'll make this in the exhibitor area available. And then if you want to chat, you can either just shoot me a note directly. I'm Jen at fireflypartners.com. Or again, we've got in the exhibitor area, we just have a little, if you come in, there's just a little form you can fill out that'll come to the team. We're going to do some of these audits with folks. If you want to sign up to do an audit with us, we're happy to help walk it through with you. But again, these tools are available out there and fully ready for anyone to use. I would say, here's one I'll just do real fast since we have just a couple minutes. Let's see if I can get to the right other, my 17,000 windows that I have open. See, everyone's like, wow, you're a window junkie, just like I am. Okay, here. I alt tab through my life. So one of the cool ones that I like is this color contrast checker. So this is an Adobe tool. There are many of these. You can put in hex colors, like put in your brand colors and see if they go to, so this is this WCAG that I talked about. WCAG 2.1 up here. Right now it's at the AA. I didn't dive into the deep end of this, but there's a AA and there's a AAA. And AAA is basically like the gold standard, and it's difficult to implement. It's not impossible, but it requires strict adherence to a much tighter framework, and the code is a lot. The framework is much tighter. So we And most folks on the internet right now are trying to get folks to get to AA standard. There's a single A, which is sort of just very, very possible. But if you're really committed to accessibility, you try to get to AA. And in color contrast mode, that means right down here, you see this pass and pass. Watch what happens when I make this a little bit darker. A little bit darker. Oh, I've already failed. This does not pass the color contrast needs for a AA standard when you're at 17 points and below. It still passes for big font, but like most of your fonts, your H2s, H3s, maybe your H1s are up at this high font size, but your smaller text on your page, this would not pass. So you can just pop in, you've got your color wheel, you can pop around, see different things, and you go, great, I want to do this, and then I want to do white. Oh, look, fail, fail. Ah, what do? Then you have to say, I got to get darker with my background. Oh, I'm still failing. People don't really love white either. That's another thing. There's lots of rules out there on the road. So orange and white, I don't like it. Red and white, that might happen. So as an example, that's just one of the tools out there. There's another one you can put in your URL. Same thing. This one does a color checker for you with different size, and it looks at the different levels of AA versus AAA, what passes and what fails. So how accessible is it? Again, there's just so many cool tools out there to go through. We just have a couple minutes left. I don't know if there's anybody that has, oh God, this is like somebody said that the other day. What was it? They said it's, anybody seen the movie Inception? I'm like, oh my God, it's like Inception. You're like going in on yourself. So one of the things that you'll go, I told you we use Perkins as a, Perkins Access as one of our partners. Love them. This is an example of, another 100% accessible website. Obviously, the Perkins folks made it. They have a Perkins School for the Blind, and then they have live, they have real people that are of a wide range of abilities that will help test your work for you and give you a whole bunch of feedback about where it fails and where does it fall apart. So while these tools are great, when you're looking at things like how usable is this section of my website, there isn't really a tool that can do that for you. Your code might be up to speed and all those types of things, but only a live person can tell you how usable it is. But this is an example of when you mouse over and something, not only does it change, the color changes, not only does it grow in size, so there's movement, slight movement, again, not like jarring, crazy, flashing things, but just enough movement for you to know like where my mouse is on the page. Makes it very, very easy for folks to mouse through your site and see what's happening. We've got videos, I'm sure with the transcription, other things, but this is a pretty nice looking site, totally accessible. Again, all the text is separate from images. There's no overlays, really nice sharp imagery and very high contrast. Even some nice graphics, those types of things. Again, mouse overs let you know where you are. And they're really, really awesome, great people to work with. I think that's about all the time we have. Any last questions? Again, if you go into the exhibitor area in the Netroots main session, the main app, and over on the side, there's a thing for exhibitors. And then on the exhibitor page, we will have this resources page is in the slide deck, and we will have I believe it's there already. This deck is a PDF. If it's not, I'll go put it there immediately after this talk. So you can get any of these resources. And again, once you get into some of them, even like the Allied Project and some of those, it all just starts to be like, oh, there's more and more and more to like see and learn and use in here. But I'm hoping that folks had some good light bulbs go off about the critical need for accessibility and inclusion in our social impact work in the digital spaces so we can best communicate with the widest audience possible. And I'd love to chat with any of you all who are kind of moving in this area and would love to do an audit with us. Let's take a look at your digital. Let's make sure that it's rocking, and then we can make sure that it's open and accessible for any user that wants to show up and get involved in your movement. So thank you guys so much. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the word guys out of my vocabulary. Thanks, y'all. We have a lovely woman, we have a lovely person on our staff who says y'all as the most inclusive term there is. So thanks, y'all, for showing up and for hanging out this whole time. It's been great, and I look forward to seeing you at a Netroots in person, hopefully at some point in the near future. And I hope you have a great rest of your Netroots, and that you attend such other great sessions. I'll put this over there. I'll check out our exhibitor page. Would love to hear from you, and let me know how it's going.